Hola, hola, muy bien, ¿y ustedes?
Muy bien también. Te presento
Bien.
a Ángela.
Hola, Ángela,
Hola, con mucho gusto,
igualmente.
Ángela. ¿Y de dónde habla? ¿De la ciudad de Chihuahua o?
Chihuahua, Chihuahua, sí.
Ah, muy
Ajá.
bien.
Mapi, si quieres comentarle tantito de qué es tu empresa a
Por
Ángela para que
favor.
se vaya dando una idea.
Hola, Ángela, mi empresa es de consultoría,
Ok,
consultoría de empresa, hacemos sistemas ISO, desarrollo de proveedores y sistemas de apoyo a recursos humanos.
ok, ok.
Ujú.
Muy bien. Entonces lo ha ido con la certificación con respecto de ISO y ISO 9000 o otro.
ISO 9001, 14 y 45001 y 22.
Ah, muy bien, muy
Ajá,
bien. ¿Y
sí.
está basado en la ciudad o en Juárez? Perdón.
Chihuahua, Chihuahua.
Nuevo Chihuahua. Ah, muy
Sí.
bien. Ah, ok. Perfecto. Sí, sí, es una gran necesidad, especialmente por todo de la manufactura que hay. Eso es
Sí,
creo
sí.
que muy importante. Muy bien. Ok. Yo creo que estamos.
Tengo a alguien con iPhone, pero no tiene nombre, no sé quién es.
Ahí.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es César Fierro. Es la primera sesión en la que nos unimos. Nos registramos el nombre de Adrián Nájera, como de la empresa
Ah,
NextMX.
ok, muy
Ok.
bien. Mucho gusto, Adrián. Bienvenidos. Ahí nada más, déjame ver si yo puedo cambiarle el nombre.
Si quieren, aquí yo lo cambio. No me ha dado
Ándale,
cuenta que
padrísimo. Sí, porque nada más digo, para que sepas, le compartimos evidencia al estado de Chihuahua quienes se unen. Entonces ahí para que salga el nombre.
Ok. Voy a poner el nombre de Adrián.
Ándale, padrísimo. Igual si nos compartes tantito y rapidito de qué es tu empresa, presento a Ángela para que Ángela vaya conociéndoles un poquito.
Sí, claro. Bueno, nosotros somos la empresa NextMX. Nos dedicamos, tenemos varios giros, pero principalmente nos dedicamos a lo que es la capacitación y certificación especializada, principalmente en lo que es manufactura electrónica, todo
Ok.
lo que requiere para certificarse en esa área. Y tenemos una línea de ensamble SMT para componentes electrónicos.
Ok. Ok. ¿Y de eso de que, cómo se llama la empresa suya?
NetsMX.
Ok. Sí, no, es interesante porque sí, de todo esto es muy pertenece a la industria ahí, en la manufactura, especialmente en la asamblea de circuitos electrónicos en las tabletas. Muy bien, con gusto. Bueno, voy a empezar, pero todos hablan inglés porque me pidió favor de hablar en inglés porque van a grabar esta conversación. Si está bien y bueno, por favor que me avise, yo puedo también explicar en español, pero voy a intentar primero en inglés y si no entienden algo, por favor que me interrumpes y ya, yo puedo explicarlo en español para dar más claridad. ¿Ok? Eso realmente, bueno, okay, the English now. So this particular discussion is really about expanding into new markets. Expanding into new markets, this is crafted with some startups in mind. So this is really for kind of the startups and scale ups, companies that are ready to go into new markets. And so it's really, looking at what is your market viability and really helping you craft the right strategy and messaging to attack and tackle into a new market. And by the way, I'll just also, my name is Angela Pack Zia. I'm with Texas Global Business, and Texas Global Business, we're a consulting organization that helps expanding businesses into new markets, but also economic development programs throughout US, North America, South America, and Europe. So we've collaborated a lot with TechCrunch, and we're excited to be here on their behalf today. So thank you. So, again, with the startup and scale-ups in mind, congratulations, you already have your proof of concept for your business. Now you're ready to actually move to the next level to prove your market viability. And so when we're looking at what is proof of concept versus market viability, the real question we're asking is, we're no longer asking, does this work, but will it thrive in the market? And so it's really helping you define a strategic path for sustainable growth, and really help you craft the compelling reason for companies or clients to use your solution. And that gets us to the next stage, which is, the first part is ascertaining and communicating your value proposition. And really, your value proposition is your core promise of value you deliver to your customers. And it's really helps distinguish if your product is going to be viable in your target markets. So when you're entering into a new market, you might be already into one, you have to understand that your value proposition is likely to change. It's not always going to translate from one market to another, one industry to another, one geographic region to another geographic region. So when you enter into a new market, you need to think about, for that particular company or target market, why should that customer or clients in that market choose your solution over any other option that exists in that market? So you really have to do some due diligence in that and really be able to quantify the benefits that your product offers, and then be able to address the specific pain points and any unmet need that's in that particular region, in that particular market, that's not being addressed properly. This is how you are really looking at how to differentiate your product from those that are already existing in the marketplace. And when you're differentiating yourself, you're not, when we talk about benefits, we're not just looking at pure benefits. You might also incorporate long-term operational efficiencies in your ROI, and also sustainable measures in your ROI, so such as social and environmental aspects. So we're looking at new markets. We're looking at possible different vertical markets, such as different industries, as well as geographic markets. And so, understanding who your ideal customer is in each segment is fundamental. And it really will allow you to have that foothold that you need to continue to craft your messaging and market expansion. So I want to introduce the concept of unique value proposition. We just spoke about value proposition. Now it's unique value proposition, because every product market, or every market, will have its own pains, its own price points, its own needs that are not met. And so they might change, just like the hospital industry or healthcare industry is going to be different from a manufacturing industry. So would an educational market be very different from an agricultural market. So just to help you segment those particular unique value propositions that your product might have within each market. And this allows you to tailor accordingly. So when you're looking at those markets, these are the things that you'd want to look at. Okay, so we talked about industry structure. So, again, clarifying the healthcare versus manufacturing and so forth. But also there's going to be little problem nuances that might not be apparent right up front. And that might be, again, those different pain point issues. An example would be like of a data breach. A data breach in a financial institution is going to be way more of a threat than a data breach in a club that people go to on a regular basis. So understanding those little nuances is important. And then other aspects of what we call customer persona differences. And that might be like maybe different markets will have a different way to make decisions. So they might have different processes, different budget cycles, different styles of how they make those decisions. For example, you're talking about a Japanese company, they're going to be very collective up high up. Seldomly will the person you're speaking to be the decision maker. They take a much more executive, high collective approach in their decision making. So understanding those, persona characteristics is actually very important. And then also the geographical specificity. So, each region will have its own regulatory landscape to navigate. Understanding how that applies to your solution is going to be important. And then we talk about business nuances, but we're also now talking about cultural nuances. Cultural nuances will be, maybe communication styles or business practices. It can also reflect how a product or solution is already being perceived in that market. That might, if a specific, say, brand or a specific approach is very popular, it might take a little bit of a challenge to try to break through and to offer a new solution, even no matter how great your solution is. So understanding these cultural nuances and perceptions is important. And then also understanding the infrastructure and logistical capabilities to deliver your solution. So do you have an efficient way to ensure that you get your product delivered? And is that solution deliverable reliable? So those are things that are important. And then last but not least is the economic and political conditions. We're in a time of tariffs. Things have changed a lot here. So that's an example of economic conditions. But it could be, looking into the purchasing power, or the pain points that your particular market has. So maybe they have a tighter budget. Maybe they have more flexible budgets. So understanding those conditions, security issues might be of concern, especially or intellectual property concerns, financial institution stability. If you're obtaining loans or relying on financial institutions for payment. So those are things to consider. And then the next is really kind of creating a comparative landscape of the competition. And I think it's easy for companies to think their competition is another competitor that does the same thing that they do. And it's not always the case. The competition is really any method or any product that addresses the same problem that you're trying to solve. It doesn't matter if it's in a different way or not. And so the biggest challenge in entering a new market is going to always be customer inertia. And I mentioned that a minute ago. It's like if you have a market and everybody's used to a certain solution, there's a big customer inertia to get over that to try to bring in a new solution. So understand that's the first hurdle, but then the next is to really identify all the different competitors. So direct competitors are going to be those companies that offer similar solutions. They're it's kind of the similar workaround to the challenge that you're offering. The indirect is going to be a completely different solution, a different approach, but it's still addressing the same core problem. And then you also have potential substitutes or workarounds. Maybe your company decides, I can do this on my own. Oh, I have people, I've got engineers, I'll just create my own system. And that's their own workaround. And so when you're looking at your competitive landscape, understand all of these different areas of competition and do a clear competitive analysis on advantages and disadvantages. And that will include, why do the customers choose these solutions? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses and limitations? What are the costs? What are the benefits? But also importantly, there's pricing model, market share, where are they in the market? What does the customer perceive? If the customer is very happy, even if it costs them more, they might have a hard time adjusting to another solution. So these are aspects to always consider when you're doing your competitive analysis. And then also understand clearly, how do they go to market? What is their market distribution source like, and how do they deliver their product? And this is all important information for you to look at, to understand how do you want to craft yours to be a superior than your competitors ultimately. Now, we talked about competition, but now we also have in our market complementary and services and products, and then other products that are natural adjacents. Because any solution rarely stands alone in an ecosystem. So you understand now you have your competitive landscape mapped out. Now you're developing the ecosystem to understand what products and services go well with yours. So, and you can divide into two approaches. One is like those products that enhance your solution. So it makes your solution more effective, more appealing, easier to use. But it can also be just a natural adjacent that, hey, they're already using this, and this is a nice add-on to what they're already using. It's a nice, it goes, in conjunction with what you're offering. And so this provides a great opportunity for business strategy expansion. You can, cultivate that network and explore potential channel partnerships with those providers to, maybe you can bundle services or do cross promotions, or just even understanding how they go to market and then how you could piggyback and make sure you're tied in with the same distribution channels. And I'll, an example, I just wanted to give you a couple examples of types of complementary services. And some of the work that I've done is in water quality sensors. So you have sensors while you're measuring the water quality. Well, then you need data loggers. So the data logger goes with the sensor so that you're able to easily read that. But then you want to be able to keep those sensors in and have long-term data. So you can add an IoT system. So now you have sensors, which are standalone products. You have data loggers, and now you have IoT platforms, and they're all integrated and sold together. So that's a great, idea of a product that synergy that can be bundled together. But it also can create some challenges and that also need to be, or risks that need to be mitigated. And one is when you're very reliant on that full packaging solution with a potential enhanced other product solution, you also you also become dependent on the reliability of that product into the market. So we've seen during COVID issues with supply chain. So those are things to understand, like especially if you cannot, if you don't have full-on control and access to the development and the reliance. Especially, and another example would be a complete re-engineering of that product. If you're reliant upon a product that goes well with your product, and that product's completely re-engineered and is no longer an asset, what are the risks for your product line? So those are two things to think about. Are there any questions up to this point? I just wanted to, okay.
No.
All right, so we talked about unique value proposition, competitive mapping of your competition, and also the eco mapping of your complementary product lines and services. Now we're ready to test and do some beta testing into the market. And this is surprising in my consulting. It's been the hardest part to sometimes explain the necessity of this to new companies going into new markets. They often just want to be able to replicate whatever they did in one market to another. And I think the important part is to understand is it doesn't always translate from one market to another. So it's really important. You have different stakeholders, you have different variations of variabilities. You might not even have the same technology in one that was used in one market that's available in the other. So so when you go into a new market, it's important to really develop a clear beta testing for the target markets that you're trying to reach. And the importance of this obviously is, one, it's validating to the market as well as to yourself, your own company, the product is a good fit for that market. And it also builds credibility when you're trying to market your product. So key objectives in your market beta testing is, well, I just said validate fit, but it also is an opportunity for you to look at real world situations and provides like a feedback loop to allow you to refine your products before you try to launch and put a lot of investment into that new market. So maybe there are certain refinements of the product for usability, performance, enhancement features that might need to go into that particular product or service that you're delivering. in this new market. And this beta testing allows you to kind of figure that out before you spend a lot of money and then have people upset with you. The other part of this is it allows you, once you have that, is it allows you to fine tune, and really you're fine tuning it for the ultimate goal is to expand. So it provides this, it's next level to start scaling. And that one is hand in hand with your partner who you're beta testing with. So the important part is finding that partner who's going to be giving you, willing to be able to offer testimonials and provide clear case studies of success. So how to find the best fit partner is the key. And I'll give you some things to think about when finding your best fit partner for beta testing. One is you need, obviously, the ideal target. So, the market, but that particular target and that particular partner in that ideal market needs to have a genuine motivation. So they're probably in the most need of a solution. So they have a genuine motivation to try to adopt a new product or a new solution because they have a big pain point. And so when you see that, these are the key things to keep in mind. One is they are open to innovation and experimenting with you, but you need to ensure that there is a proper mechanism for information sharing upfront. That's really, really key. And that's where things do often fall when they do beta testing. If you don't have that mechanism in place for information sharing, then you lose valuable information and data and the whole purpose of doing the beta testing to begin with. So ensuring a partner who's committed to having an internal process to collect and share insights and details and quality feedback is essential. And also make sure that they are willing to be advocates and help craft testimonies and a positive case study as you're working through any challenges. And at the end, you have the ultimate goal of what you want. And so let's just kind of go over the next is the beta testing structure. So we talked about, having clear goals and objectives. Those clear goals and objectives, obviously, at the end of the day, you want to validate and build credibility. And so how you do that really is defined based on the metrics that that are pertinent, most pertinent to the market and to the validity of your product. So clarify those upfront, define the timeline that you want to work this through. And then sometimes this is another area that I see as a problem is you found your beta tester, you've done all of this, you've got everything ready, but there's been a lack of true onboarding and training for your beta testers. And so that takes some time and investment as well. But it's also an opportunity for you as your company to understand if you're deploying this to new companies, how then do you need to make sure that the onboarding information is smooth and well communicated? So this is an opportunity again for helping companies and customers understand the usability of your product. And last but not least, I talked about communication mechanism, but is also including an incentive to the beta testers, ensure that they feel that they're valued and they will be rewarded for the risk and the time that they're putting in on your behalf. Okay, so now you've got all this data. You have your beta testing. You have all of you can talk about the ROIs. You can talk about all of the pain points. You can now distinguish your product from that of your competitors, and you know all about the market. But now you have a bunch of facts. Now you have to put those facts all together in a compelling narrative that will help companies understand and relate to your product. And this is also an area that I find, especially more recently, listening to a lot of startup companies and do their pitch, they're full on facts and very little on story. And really what's so important is to not forget the power of storytelling, because you can have all the best facts and figures and data, but if you can't connect with that customer on an emotional level to help them visualize and understand why this matters to them, they're just it's going to be kind of a blank. So I'll give you some pointers on this just as you are crafting your story. So you've got all this data, but now you have to, number one, connect what is familiar to what is being proposed. I call it from, jumping from point A to D without helping them understand B and C can be very difficult. So it's really helping them create that journey, visualizing the journey. And an example I always liked was when automobiles were first introduced, they were not really well received. And I actually listened to my grandfather, who was recorded as an oral history project back in the bicentennial of the U.S. And he was a little boy when horses were the common use of transportation, and when automobiles were being introduced. So he talked about that. So this refrain of get a horse. People didn't like it at first. It was noisy. It was loud. It was smoky. But the general understanding of how to go from point A to point D, you start using different language. So horsepower. So reframing the narrative into a familiar understanding was really how automobiles became. Now we don't use horse and buggies for the most part. We have a few groups that do, but I think that's important to understand. The other part is the transformational journey. Crafting your approach from what once was, which is, okay, we were in a time when we were limited. Maybe you talk about the inefficiencies of something, to where we are now, which is, okay, now we're in a situation of need. There's now a certain point where challenges have accumulated, and now your product offers the future. It will create a visual path to a benefit, success, transformation. So that's part of that story. So connecting what is familiar, and then the transformational journey. And then also, don't be afraid to leverage. In fact, please leverage others to tell the story for you. The beta testers partners is a really important part of that, especially if you're coming into a new market. But other instrumental influencers could be certain industry associations, for example, or other users from elsewhere that can still serve to craft and tell your story. And let's see. Oh, yes. And of course, use the data. Incorporate ROI, but don't stop with just, the hard facts. Make sure you're incorporating the direct, the social, other aspects and benefits into your narrative. And then, of course, other things to consider is look at your audience. Who are you talking to? Even within the same vertical or the same general market, you will be talking to different people. You might be talking to technical people versus executive people versus procurement specialists. And each one will have a different approach to, so you'll tailor your story, your information, the delivery according to your audience. And the other aspect I want to just highlight is incorporating cultural sensitivities by region, because when you ignore certain norms and values, the story will not fall well. So it's important to incorporate and understand what are the norms, the values, the issues of concern within that culture itself. And then other factors, of course, would be difference in decision-making, how, and other regulatory things that we already talked about, channel partners, how they might influence your storytelling, and so forth. Okay, well, I've got time for questions and discussions, and we can do in Spanish and English, whichever is preferable. Does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss or add?
I saw a couple of questions on the chat, so let's go
sure.
with the first one. Gabriel, would you like to open your mic?
Sure. Let me read it. Hello, Angela, and thank you.
Hello.
Do you hear me? Yeah?
A little bit, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I was wondering if you could give us an example of your experience of natural adjacent product that we can use, I mean, to grow.
Yeah, so for my own experience in natural adjacent products, I worked in water quality
Yeah,
industry.
give me an example that I can think, yeah. Mhm.
Yes. So, so for example, I will use one that's more recent for me. I worked as consultant for a company that does ultrasound technology to combat algae. And one of the things that we recognized was that it worked okay, but once you added beneficial bacteria with the ultrasound, so there's the mechanical, and then there was this other adjacent. People use natural beneficial bacteria by itself, and it is a way to reduce algae. But when you combine the two, you had an amplifying effect. Why? Because part of what the ultrasound did was it helped kill the algae, but the dead algae was basically remains, which meant back to nutrients that still fed other types of algae. So the beneficial bacteria eats dead algae. So when you added the beneficial bacteria with the ultrasound, you had an improved, enhanced approach. So so that's an example of a natural adjacent product that well,
Yeah,
actually that's one.
pretty much like the concept of synergy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or a different
Thank
example
you.
would be, you know, and that's just one, but a different example would be like a smart, you know, people think of smart solutions, right? They're putting their smart Google homes in place. Well, then adding smart appliances would feed into that. So that's a natural adjacent product. Maybe I have a smart home and I just have one or two smart appliances, but then the more appliances I get, that's a natural fit.
Yeah, I can see that as a provider, right? That's a compliment. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I'm happy to to share experiences as well.
Yeah, also, Mappy, would you like to open your mic and ask your question?
Yes, I was thinking when you were talking about the beta products and this stuff, this process for products, and I was thinking that it's very expensive because it's market research. My question is about if you have some sites or some sites in the internet to find information about market research and this stuff.
So your beta testing is going to happen once you've already done a full analysis of you know who your competition is. You've already started talking. You're kind of somewhat engaged, but maybe you're not fully engaged in the market. And the beta testers, this is a challenge. And I will tell you, I come across this a lot with a lot of companies who are wanting to expand into markets because there is a cost associated. But I have also seen the flip side of the inefficiencies and the major costs that happen if you don't do that upfront. Because if you have one shot of building a reputable clientele in a new market, and reputation is key. And so if you neglect the beta testing side and you go on full force into the market, say you find some success, One is it's going to be a hurdle because I've worked in Mexico and South America for decades, and always the question is, let me see what it's done here. Like, they don't care how successful it's been in Europe. They don't care how successful it's been in the US. There's different conditions here. We want to know how it works here. And when I have worked with companies that have tried to circumvent that, inevitably there's a process that falls flat. And part of that is that they don't know how to then properly engage their ideal customers. When you work with a market with a beta tester, you're learning all the problems that could go wrong upfront in a safe way. And I have seen companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on correcting mistakes because they did not do that. So while it's money up front and an investment up front, it pays dividends long term because it builds credibility and that validity in that marketplace. And it really helps it also allows, especially into a new market, geographic market, where there's a new culture that a company might be learning about. They learn about those cultural nuances that they might not have understood before. So it reduces friction in being able to really push your product into the new market.
Thank you.
Gabriel?
I have another question. Yeah, I have another one. Now that you mentioned that you have experience working, with Mexico and Latin America, I was wondering if there is any pattern that you have identified as in those two different markets. I mean, in your experience.
South America versus Mexico, or
pretty
Mexico
much.
and the U.S. or like where U.S. and.
Well, I don't know if you live in the border area, but Chihuahua State is very similar to El Paso or New Mexico. It's pretty much the same. So I was wondering, what's the main different cultural? I mean, you know what I'm trying to say, no?
So there are.
I mean, I'm trying.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, and I'm familiar with. I worked a lot. In fact, I just last week was in the Rio Grande Valley area all week. So which is Matamoros,
any. Oh yeah. Well, actually, it's a little bit different right there from here. There's I think it's more culturally it's more different right there than Chihuahua from El Paso.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to ask is some advice. I don't know, any hack to take the whole market area. I mean that area.
For El Paso as well. Okay. So
oh yeah, Chihuahua, El Paso, New Mexico, all the border area.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, there is a difference, and I used to work I used to work in the semiconductor industry many years ago, so I'm dating myself, but I used to go back and forth. So los circuitos electrónicos conozco muy bien, todas las empresas ahí. But so I used to stay in the El Paso and go into Juarez during the day to visit all the clients. So I'm very familiar with the area, and there are so absolutely each region has its own market, has its own culture. You go to Guadalajara, it's very different than when you are in Juarez Juarez and and so there is that sensibility, those cultural nuances to be aware of. So if you were looking from Chihuahua going into U.S. side, El Paso, or to New Mexico side, I think you have a lot of people who already work. There's already a lot of people. If you go to El Paso, a lot of the people who work in El Paso might be from Juarez, right? You have that crossover, that whole synergy area right there. So is there a difference in how to approach that market versus how to approach a different market within a different region? Absolutely. I might need a little bit more guidance as to your question to be able to give you my full opinion on what I think, but.
Well, I was wondering because my startup is about the healthcare marketplace. I receive patients from El Paso, New Mexico, Chihuahua, but I use the same marketing system, so my approach is the same. And approximately 50% from the population that I serve is from the border area USA, and another 50 from Mexico, right?
Mhm.
So I just wanted to know how to identify those difference like very quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's hard,
This
it's difficult.
and I think what would be really, important. So you're being insightful, right? You're being very insightful, saying, okay, there might be a difference in perceptions by my clientele. What are those perceived perceptions? And it might also be other technology they might use, or maybe access to different types of healthcare. And maybe there's a lack of access to certain populations, and so there's an advantage there. So I think those are the questions that you could easily ask yourself, and then possibly as you are surveying and working with clients, include that in their survey, right? What other options do you like? Why do you like this service versus another service? And then you can profile them based on where do you live, and then really have some kind of a better understanding. So it's kind of like it's not a beta testing per se, but it's really a understanding your market, which is really, that's what the beta test is. So if you're already in that market, you just want to get clarity so that you can better fine tune your approach and effectively affect your market share in that area. So maybe you find in your surveys that some of these clients, they lack access to, a rural clinic, and this is a really great way for you. And so, that might be a big plus. So I think surveying your customers, getting a clear profile of who they are, will inform you and again help you refine your product.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you for the information, Angela. Pretty interesting. So we work on both sides of the border from in our business, and Juarez, El Paso is definitely, there's some similarities, like Omar was saying, but more generally what we've seen is that yes, you do have to tailor your solutions. In our case, we provide digital signage solutions, and so in Mexico we find that the customers are a lot more. They want to solve the entire problem with you. So they want you to solve the entire problem for them. And in the US, we found that it's a little more segmented. So there's maybe some people that specialize just on this area, or some other guy does this. So, but in Mexico, we found that doesn't work. It's just that's just the way the market is. So, yes, and we did that mostly by trial and error. Just trying to. We have a solution, we have a service, but how do we sell it? How we offer it? It depends on who we're talking to, and what they're looking for. Yep.
Yeah. So what we were saying is it's exactly the case. You're different, even if you're in the same vertical market by geography and different characteristics of how things are structured. It's going to be a different approach, and being open to that and versatile, and then understanding then what is then your value, because you might say, okay, for this market, we're going to change our approach to be a full solutions provider, where this approach we're going to do, I'm just speaking of it like an a la carte kind of approach, depending on what the customer wants. I don't know enough about, but I think that's absolutely that's the key message I'm hoping to share today. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Angela. I saw one more question from Sebastian. Sebastian, can you open your mic?
Yes, sure. I just changed from the device, so I forget. I typed my question. Could you send it again in the chat?
Yeah, I can read for you.
It was related like the how to define the MVP to make the beta test.
Yeah. So that was the whole your value proposition is really going to be, and that's kind of and what I'll do actually is set up. I've got my notes that I wrote up as well, just to kind of help clarify. But when you're looking at your value proposition for that particular market, that's what I was talking about, that unique value proposition. So when you're defining it, you really are not defining it in an isolation. I really wanted to kind of paint the picture of the understanding of what you are adding value to within the scope of the market you're in. So that looks at who is your competition, direct, indirect, other solutions that the customer themselves are providing for themselves. That's going to impact how you develop your value proposition. So it's not an isolation. It is it's, you know, the first and foremost, when you do a value proposition, you're looking at what are the pain points, what is the situation you're solving, and what are the benefits, and what are the savings. You know, it can be an ROI based, just, you know, financial ROI, but it can also have other spillover impacts such as social, environmental impacts as well. And so understanding that is not in itself enough. You need to look at all these other aspects in a particular market, looking at the full ecosystem that you're going to be working in, and asking yourself those particular questions. What are my direct competition? What's my indirect competition? What are the cultural nuances that I have to overcome? What are the structural issues that I have to overcome? So all of that really goes into crafting your market value proposition. And what I'll be happy to do is put my notes together and send them with this presentation to share, because I've got a lot of bullet points, and I'm trying to, again, this is dating myself, but back in the 90s and the 2000s, we used bullet point, and I tried to avoid bullet point, but I like bullet points for myself. So I'm happy to share those bullet points that I created.
Sure, if you can send it to me and I can post it on the community so everyone can have access to it with the recording of this session.
Perfect. Okay.
Perfect. So we have a few minutes left. Does anyone have another question? Okay, so I think that we have all covered it. Angela, would you like to say some final words to this cohort?
Well, I'll speak in Spanish. ¿Está bien? Sí, termino en español. Bueno, un gusto conocerles. Por favor, si estoy aquí para servirles, trabajo conjunto en colaboraciones con Emma y con TechRanch. A vez en cuando, de hecho, estaba parte de la iniciativa con Startup Chihuahua. Y realmente, bueno, estoy muy alegre para ayudarles, y si tengo información o consejos que puedo darles, me encantaría participar en esos programas en el futuro.
Muchísimas gracias por tu tiempo, Ángela. A todos,
Agradecido.
Thank you.
por unirse.
Gracias.
Seguimos en contacto.
Ok, gracias.
Buenas tardes. Hasta
Hasta
luego.
luego.
Hasta luego.
Hasta
Chao.
luego.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.